talk a little bit about the context, but then also highlighting what the digital world is doing for us these days, and then, how we can educate for a more sustainable world, keeping this world in balance, in a better balance, but also ensuring that, young people learn to live in a world that is sometimes imbalanced. One of the things that we do at the OECD is track the evolution of technology, artificial intelligence. One of the things that we did recently, actually starting in 2016, was to ask artificial intelligence to solve tests that we often give to humans. Here, our survey of adult skills. And actually, when we did this in 2016, we could see, well, computers can solve all of the easy tasks for human. That's not so much a surprise, but they could also solve about 1/4 of the tasks that are difficult for us humans, where you have to distinguish fact from opinion, where you have to triangulate different information sources. But when we did that, in 21 again, we could see how dramatically technology has improved. And, for 2026, we predict that artificial intelligence is going to be able to solve 4 out of 5 tasks that are most difficult for humans now. What I want to say really is that the kind of things that are easy to teach and easy to test are these days also the kind of things that are easy to digitize, to automate. There's a great concern that we educate second-class robots, people who are just good at repeating what we told them. And that we forget what it means to be human in this world of technology. And that is the key to sustainability. When you look at our economies, routine tasks are disappearing. If you have a job that you can explain in the form of an algorithm, a computer is going to do that better and faster for you. Technology-intensive tasks are on the rise. You put the two things together and you can see the future of work. Some people say, well, technology is going to destroy more jobs than it creates. Others say, well, it's going to create more jobs than it destroys. Very hard to know the answer to this, but the direction of travel is clear. Easy tasks that, are just about the reproduction of subject knowledge are losing in importance now. But, when we ask 15-year-olds in our last PISA assessment, what do you want to do in your future? What kind of job would you like to have when you grow up? What you can see here is that 30, 40, sometimes more than 50% of young people aspire to the kind of jobs that are at the highest risks of automation. And that should concern us. It really shows that sometimes we educate kids for our past, not for their future. We educate them for the kind of jobs that are disappearing. We do not spend enough time to educate them for the jobs that are our future now. Think of the economy in Ukraine. It's going to be a very, very different economy after the war. Companies are not going to build back better. They're going to build forward very differently, using new technology, new kinds of skills. Green technologies, digital technologies, those are going to be the drivers of our future. How do we get ready for that now? Let me show you one more slide that is actually also quite, disturbing. Very recently, we actually surveyed 15-year-olds and 10-year-olds about creativity. And in every region for which we had data, we found that 15-year-olds reported lower levels of creativity than 10-year-olds. Well, that we need to get better. And here I show you some really interesting data. On the vertical axis, I show you the quality of education as measured by student performance. The higher up the countries are, the stronger learning outcomes. On the horizontal axis, I show you a measure of a student growth mindset. What do I mean by growth mindset? Well, growth mindset is about students believing that the sky is the limit. If I try hard, I'm going to, overcome my limits and I'm going to be successful. You can see here Estonia. That's the country where almost every student has that growth mindset. And they're also doing really well academically. If you look on the other end of the spectrum, a country like Indonesia, Students struggle academically, but also many of them believe that, success is about the intelligence I was born with. So what I'm telling you is that we shouldn't think about, the cognitive development of students, the knowledge and the social and emotional development as two opposing ends on a spectrum. We should think about them more like two sides of the same coin. We develop one to nourish the other. That's really important, that growth mindset, that mindset that we build in students, that motivation, that curiosity, then drives their learning in substantive knowledge. And it's not just about, academic performance, like you see here. We saw that students with a growth mindset were motivated to master difficult tasks. They had a greater sense of self-efficacy. They were less afraid of failure. Imagine this again. If you want kids to be creative, imaginative, solving tomorrow's sustainability issues, you need to give them space to experiment. If kids, experiment, they need to take risks. If they take risks, they make mistakes. If our education systems do not help students to learn from and with mistakes, maybe, students are not going to be so creative now. So once again, mindset as important as knowledge and skills. So let's turn to the digital world and the opportunities that it provides. During the pandemic, Ukraine developed digital learning platforms to help students learn when schools were closed. And everybody thought, oh, that's, an incredible kind of disruption of education service. It was a stopgap measure, an emergency. But, that disruption created the foundation for education to continue during the war. So you can see one disruption that, can have terrible consequences can actually make education, make us more resilient to deal with the most difficult circumstances. So let's look at the digital world in education in more detail. Now, what is very clear that, the pandemic has woken up schools to this digital world that is already radically transforming learning. And that holds a lot of promise, First of all, is personalization. While you study mathematics on a computer, the computer can figure out how you learn and then make your learning experiences so much more interactive, so much more granular, so much more adaptive. Students with special needs can learn in ways that are most adaptive to them. There's an incredible power of technology to tailor learning experiences to our needs. Well, learning has become fun. If you think about game-based learning environments, they're incredible. They actually provide so many interesting opportunities for students to learn in different ways, in ways that are truly fun. Virtual reality, can embed learners in a three-dimensional picture. Why do you want to listen to a teacher who explains to you the result of an experiment when you can do that experiment in a virtual laboratory now? Huge potential in this world. Or think about augmented reality. You can now sort of beam the virtual world into real time in what kids do in a classroom or even outside the classroom. The virtual world and the real world can become integrated through technology. This is so powerful. Some people say, well, I don't want to see robots in the classroom. And I have some sympathy with this. Education is not a transactional business. Education is always a social, relational experience. But, we have to acknowledge robots can do incredible things. Think about language learning. The only way you're never going to learn a foreign language is by having a teacher talking to you about grammar and vocabulary. Languages we learn through interaction, through experiences. And actually, robots can be quite good at that. They can explain things to you, can interact with them. An interesting example in Japan, where actually they figured out that students sometimes learn better when they talk to a computer, explain their own experiences to a robot, than when, somebody talks to them. Sometimes you learn best through experiencing, explaining. So, we should, not dismiss those kinds of experiences. And then, there is the huge potential of technology to transform assessment and evaluation. I think maybe one of the biggest mistakes that we made in the history of education was to divorce learning from assessment. We ask students to pile up years and years and years of learning. And then, one day we call them back and say, well, tell me everything that you know in a very contrived, constrained setting. And we call this an exam now. And it's often so superficial now. Asking lots of little questions about lots of little things that are not so important. Because the important human skills are just so much more difficult to observe. No? And then that, trickles down into poorer teaching. But with technology, we can reintegrate learning and assessment and making them again, part of the same story. While you study, you get that personal feedback. Your teacher sees how different students learn differently now through learning analytics. Now. Countries in Asia are incredibly strong on this, now, making teachers data science, now, giving them real-time information how different students learn differently and helping them, adapt learning experiences to entirely new context, entirely new situations. Now. That's the power of technology these days. Now. And then, you factor artificial intelligence into this. That's the next frontier. Let's have a look at that, Some people say, well, ChatGPT is very nice, but in the end, it's not very useful because it never tells me where they get their stuff from. It just, throws some answer at me and I don't know whether, that's the right answer, true, and so on. Well, that's solvable. If you talk to the people in the industry, they will tell you, well, that's just a matter of how those machines have been designed, but we can solve that problem of traceability. We can also become more accurate, as the training data sets get larger, you're going to get better answers. That's not so much a question. You think a few, months down the road, these systems are also going to get better to interpret your questions, to understand your questions, to adopt, a more human writing style. And that's just a matter of training. Bigger question in the long term is, will artificial intelligence get around inheriting human biases? No? The training data that, are being used to train artificial intelligence are built on human experiences. And that's often a problem, because humans, we are all biased. We see, situations through specific lenses that are framed by our own experiences. And then, artificial intelligence is not a magic power. It's just a great amplifier, a great accelerator, but it will accelerate good ideas and good practices in the same way it accelerates poor ideas and poor practices. That's so hard. Will we solve that? Not so clear. In the long term, some people say, yeah, technology might, develop something like intuition. Other people say, well, that's going to be the limit of it. No. We don't know, but we have to kind of use those kinds of forces. And today, you can see that's already happening now. If you are a student in a classroom, you can actually discover a lot of interesting new stuff, not just learning material. You can also, discover new jobs. You can discover the real world. You no longer have to go to a company to experience a job. You can see that in the virtual world through artificial intelligence, adapted to your needs. No? Artificial intelligence can write your job application. No? You write your CV. No? All of those things are really, really incredible. You can discover entirely new worlds. You can learn, practice, apply your knowledge in different ways. No? Again, I showed already, learning becomes more adaptive, more granular, more interactive. Incredible power of technology. And then, you can create and share. And the biggest promise really doesn't maybe lie in school, but it gives learners true ownership over what they learn and how they learn and where they learn and when in their lives they learn. That is so important. And the same holds for teachers. You factor teachers into this, and also the first thing that technology is doing, it's reducing administrative work for teachers. Now, one of the things that often gets into the way of teachers is, they get bogged down with doing so much stuff that actually, doesn't relate to that human experiences. I show you some really interesting data that when we ask teachers, what causes you stress? The answer is not, working with students. The answer is typically, I have to do a lot of administrative stuff. And that's true in most countries now. Here's something even more interesting. We ask ourselves, to what extent is, adding time, adding stress. And when you look at the black line, that's about teaching. Actually, you can ask teachers to teach more hours, and the impact it has on stress is very minimal. The reason people become teachers is because they like to work with children, and that human contact actually is not what causes stress. But you add a little bit of time on administrative work, that's the green line here, and you can see it induces a lot of stress. So if technology can help us solve that problem, it can make a big difference now. And then, of course, also teachers can discover new material. They can prepare their, lesson plans with artificial intelligence. And many do that today. There are amazing kind of programs that actually help teachers, get better prepared, analyze student works, discover new stuff, coaching, feedback, professional collaboration, professional development, also incredibly powerful. And then, I already highlighted assessment and evaluation. So students and teachers will see their experience being changed. Technology is not going to make teaching redundant. Actually, it makes it even more important, but it transforms the experience. That's so important. How do we get ready for that? Well, there are opportunities and there are challenges. Now, the challenges are mainly about ethics and equity, not so much about technology. If you think about the opportunities, you could frame them in terms of, on the one hand, personalization. You want to make sure that learning experiences are individualized, personalized. And then you can look at technology intensity. Well, traditional learning, isn't doing very well on either front. We put people in a classroom, we teach them something, and, that is so effective. Well, personalization is not necessarily about technology. Think about tutoring. Incredibly effective. But it's very human resource intensive. It's very hard to scale. Human relationships are very, very hard, to put on a larger scale. So tech enablement can solve part of the problem, but not necessarily. Often we just throw more computers into a classroom and then think it's going to change things. It doesn't. If you want to see, learning experiences change, you have to, reimagine space, time, pedagogy, technology. It's not just about making the content more, focused on sustainability. It's also making our methods more sustainable, more adaptive, more interactive, more connected. Schools are often very good in keeping students inside and the rest of the world outside. But the more we can integrate, the world of learning with the world of work with life, the more we'll be successful to create, future-oriented learning environments. Well, there are always challenges. You think about artificial intelligence, the first challenge is, how do students learn about the advantages and the risks of artificial intelligence? I highlighted, artificial intelligence is such an incredible source of knowledge, but it can also be an incredible source of disinformation, of misinformation. How do we navigate this? When we invented cars, soon after we invented seatbelts and road signs. We try to make, that world around us compatible to ensure that, cars were serving humans, not being a threat. And sort of we have to do something similar when it comes to artificial intelligence, making sure that it is, conducive to our human life. And then also, finding role models. That's also very important. Who's doing that best and why? Now, what can we learn from that? So leveraging opportunities, navigating challenges is really, really important. That's the power of artificial intelligence. And that's, the promise of all of this. But I want to bring you back to reality. Now, what our data also shows that often, technology intensity is sometimes negatively related to learning outcomes. The more technology you throw into a classroom, the worse the results become. And that shows us that, technology as such is not the answer. It is really the integration. And one of the explanations is that where teachers are not at the heart of the design of those learning experiences, they're not very well equipped to help with implementation. And that's often the problem. We buy some solution, but we do not, make the teachers, creative designers of innovative learning environments, good coaches, good mentors, great facilitators. That's so important. Smart education is never about technology. It's always about radically reimagining what technology, what teaching and learning can be when we empower them with technology. It's about moving from the technology to the learning activity, understanding how humans learn and how we can support that with technology. Is making, devices present, but maybe not visible, not distracting from the human task of learning. Using artificial intelligence to empower, not disempower teachers. And, we can do a lot to cultivate a system that is more innovation friendly, that recognizes good ideas, that rewards teachers for great ideas. And personally, I've seen so many teachers in Ukraine who are incredibly imaginative in this very difficult situation, redesigning spaces, time, building new technologies, connecting people in new ways. This is the future of learning. Creating a level playing field for innovation, governed by ethics, transparency, reconciling free data flows with data protection, investing resources more strategically, and most importantly, investing in human capabilities, capacities. And we can do that. Again, there are good examples where this is happening today. So that's how we can leverage, the digital world to create a more sustainable education systems, and by implication, to make our world more sustainable. But I want to touch on one last aspect that is equally important. Not how we can leverage technology to make education more sustainable, but how can we leverage education to make our world more sustainable? Let's think about this. Education has created an amazing world around us. Everything around you has to do with education. Our identity, our culture, our language, our technology, our society. It's all the fruit of education. None of this is just grown by nature. It's all come through human learning experiences. So we should be proud of our schools, of our education institutions, of our teachers. At the same time, the education of the past has also left the world with some fundamentally disconnects. If you think about sustainability, think about the disconnect between that infinite growth imperative, we can do always more and more, and at the same time, the finite resources of our planet that we become increasingly aware of. Sometimes we divorce the financial economy from the real economy. We see a growing gap between the wealthy and the poor. That makes this world so volatile, unsustainable. That leads not just to economic polarization, but ultimately also to cultural polarization, political polarization. Our gross domestic product, through which we, measure economic growth, is not always reflecting the well-being of people. What is technologically possible doesn't necessarily serve the social needs of people. The way we run ourselves leaves a lot of people voiceless. So if we want to see a different world, we also have to think about a different education system. We ask students about it, 15-year-olds, and you can see 8 out of 10 say, yeah, looking after the global environment is important to me. For young people, the climate agenda, the social agenda is very personal, very important. I think of myself as a citizen of the world. Young people want to be connected to this world. But when you ask them, can you do something about the problems of the world? Or do you think what you do is going to make a difference for people in other places? You can see these bars get shorter. And that's really the crux of education today. We've made young people passive consumers of prefabricated content. But we don't give them that agency, that co-agency, to live with themselves, to live with people who are different from them, and to live with this planet. That's the future of education for sustainability. Not to make kids passive consumers of the world of today, but actually to make them active citizens who are willing to mobilize their cognitive, social, emotional resources to take responsibility. How do we do that? Well, language is an obvious answer. That's the starting point. Foreign languages are a great tool to connect with other people. And they're not just about, being able to communicate with people. They open our mind, they open our heart to new worlds. There's a lot of evidence, of the cognitive benefits of language learning. We know that, learning another language increases creativity, attention, mental alertness. We see economic benefits. People who speak multiple language earn more money as in their salaries in most countries. This is a very, very kind of analysis from the Economist. But, that's not the point I really want to highlight. The point I want to highlight here is our openness to other ways of thinking, to other cultures. Very much an effect of languages. And, most school systems have done quite well on that. Now, when you actually see here, apart from a few countries on the right, English-speaking countries are a little bit lazy. They think, well, we speak English, why should we learn another language? But in most other parts of the world, you can actually see students now learn at least one foreign languages, often two. If you look to Europe, in 2003, the map was mainly red. Basically, if we taught languages, we taught it in secondary school, which is not very effective. If you want to teach foreign languages, kindergarten, primary school, those are the ages. And actually, this has happened. If you look in 2016, the map turned largely blue. In most countries, actually, now you can see languages are taught very early in primary schools because we know that's, where you can open students' minds and worlds. So that's the good news. And, what I really want to highlight here is the more languages students speak, the more open they are to different ways of thinking. The moment you understand your own language is when you learn a foreign language. That, makes you think about grammar, of vocabulary, of all those kinds of ideas and concepts. So we want young people who are more open to the world, who are more appreciative of different ways of thinking, of different cultures. Well, we better invest in that kind of language teaching. Also respect. We found that really interesting, that students who speak more languages generally tend to show greater respect for people from other cultures. But, language is just a starting point. You can look at other kind of things that schools can do. Teaching global competency. When we ask school leaders, in our school, students learn about different cultures and perspectives. Or, we teach them the norms, the beliefs of different cultures. That happens quite a lot, in history, social studies, we teach a lot. But actually what our data showed is that there's often very little activity behind that. Building an exchange program, going to a foreign country, that happens much less frequently because it's harder to organize, always takes a lot of energy. Or celebrating festivities from other cultures, opening the school doors, thinking about other religions, other cultures. But, there's a lot of variation on that. Student exchanges, you can see here in Singapore, Slovenia, that happens a lot. In Ukraine, happens, but, could happen more. But of course, I realize that's, difficult to organize, expensive to organize. But, celebrating different cultures, that's easy. We could do more of this. And you can see in Panama, Brazil, not too wealthy countries, they put a lot of emphasis on this to create that social cohesion, that openness of people. And also there, you can see in Ukraine, that's actually quite common now, that actually the schools become open to those kinds of things. But we can do more. And why is it so important? Because here you can see the number of learning activities where students do things, where they engage with other cultures, clearly relates positively to student attitudes. Students who do more of those things, like student exchanges, like engaging with other cultures, like celebrating other festivities and so on, they showed greater interest in learning about other cultures. They showed more awareness of global issues, greater agency regarding global issues, a higher degree of self-efficacy. So you can suddenly see it's actually not that difficult to create people who are open to this multifaceted world when we need to connect, collaborate, compete with people who are sometimes different from us. But it's not about teaching students something, just showing what's in the textbook. It's making them experience this, bringing that to life. As a teacher, showing your own experience, your own background. Students get very, very interested in that, and that is so powerful as an example. We ask school leaders, do your teachers believe in, that kind of multicultural aspect? And actually, it's very interesting. Ukraine was one of the top performers here. Principals generally believe, yes, our teachers try really, really hard to bring different cultures to different students, different ways of thinking, different ways of working. In other countries, that's not so common. And that's, a great starting point. But, another important part is training them to do that well. And there you can see that happens less frequently. Teaching in a multilingual context, teaching students multiple languages, that's not so common in a country like Ukraine. And in many other countries either. That's an area where we probably have to work more to make that, bring that about more clearly, to create this kind of global perspective. You see, if we want learning that is holistic in approach, that is relevant to students' lives. My teachers understand, who my students are, who they want to become, and how I can accompany them on that journey. That is transformational, that is social, that is, connected to this world. We need educators, teachers with an experience where they understand their learners as people, as individuals, where they, understand the interconnections between the subjects. The teachers collaborate across the boundaries of subject matter disciplines. And again, where they bring their own experiences into the teaching and learning process. Easy to say, hard to do, but it's really, really important. So that brings me to one last topic, and it connects again to the digital world. How do we create truly digital citizens now? Some people say, these days kids are born into the digital world, technology is natural to them. True, but they're not, digital natives. I show you this here. In 2018, just before the pandemic, we looked at the digital navigation skills. And what this means is, to what extent are students able to triangulate different information sources? To what extent are they able to distinguish fact from opinion? Navigate complex, ambiguous information. And you can see a few countries on the left, Singapore, Korea, parts of China. You can say, well, at least, 2/3 of students can do those things. But in most countries, the vast majority of students have great difficulties with this. They can use their mobile phone, they can use their tablet, but they're not equipped to live in this digital world. They're not equipped to navigate this ambiguous, complex information. Just think about the east of Ukraine. Students are growing up, under a different paradigm, with a different kind of narrative. How are they going to find their way through this? That is what this is about. We need to educate kids, to live in this digital world, to navigate ambiguity, to distinguish fact from opinion, to dissect misinformation, disinformation. And we're not doing that well. And, we shouldn't, blame students for that. Often it's the way we educate people. We make them believe what's in the textbook. Sometimes we penalize them when they question what the teacher says. So again, if we want to see a different world, we need to approach in a different education paradigm. We need to listen to our students. Student voice is very important, particularly when it comes to technology. We need to support our teachers better, and we need to build, better functioning partnerships. How we can move from a culture of public versus private to a culture of public with private in service of this broader public good. That's really what is so important. Easy to say, hard to do, but we are seeing fantastic examples. And I want to highlight again, there is no country that is in this moment in a more challenging, volatile context than education in Korea, at least in the European context, where you can see every day educators who understand this world, who are navigating, and to make every effort to make that happen. And I do believe we live in a time where we can build an education systems and where we can use education to build a better future. Thank you again. I'm looking forward to our discussion here.